and exciting elective courses on some of the current applications of mathematics in computer science. This program has 64 credits divided equally over 4 semesters. The medium of instruction is English. The core mathematics courses include algebra, real analysis, complex analysis, programming and data structures, differential equations, probability and statistics worth 34 credits. The 26 credits of elective courses are on graph theory, image processing, soft computing, cryptography, coding theory, computer graphics. Some of the core and elective courses have a practical component consisting of computer-based programming exercises that implement algorithms and techniques taught in the course. To give you some hands-on experience, the program has a project at the 4th semester. After completing the program, you may join research institutes, industry or teaching profession at any level based on your interest and aptitude. You can join the program during the January admission cycle or the July admission cycle. So what are you waiting for? You go to IGNOU Samarth admission portal and register yourself.
Namaskar, dear viewers. Today we'll be discussing the topic agricultural biodiversity. We know that biodiversity and agriculture are closely interlinked. In fact, biodiversity is the foundation for agriculture. It has ensured the evolution of croplands, the evolution of agriculture production system, even evolution of agro ecosystem also, and also the stability and health of the agro ecosystem is determined by the biodiversity. The rich the biodiversity is, definitely the agro ecosystem will be healthy and will be sustainable in nature. So in a way, if you see, the agriculture in fact contributes and enhances the biodiversity. For example, the sustainable agriculture practices. These practices help to enhance the soil biodiversity, even the crop biodiversity, and a lot of other factors that is taking place within the soil environment has been promoted by the biodiversity. So in a way, agriculture and biodiversity are closely linked. And when you look further, there are a lot of challenges that agriculture faces with respect to biodiversity. The foremost important challenge the agriculture sector faces with respect to agriculture biodiversity is the agricultural activity should promote and enhance the agriculture biodiversity, and also this agricultural activity should promote the ecosystem services provided by the valuable organisms. That is the first important challenge. The second important challenge is that whatever the activities, agriculture practices, those practices should not have negative impact on biodiversity. It's a very important challenge the agriculture sector is facing. Other challenges, if you look at it, the agriculture, what it faces is that the demand for more of production, yield gain, productivity gain is required. Why? Because the population, when you look at the human population, it is increasing year after year, and what is expected is that by the turn of the century, or in other words, by 2050, the human population will be 10 billion. It's a huge amount, numbers. So to feed the growing population, so definitely what is required is that we need to increase the agriculture production. For that, definitely the stress will be on the agricultural resources. The most important resource is agricultural diversity. Next is what other challenges the agriculture sector faces. The most important thing is that though the agriculture production in the recent past is increased due to many factors, particularly use of the technology, biotechnology and other breeding efforts, that has in fact enhanced the productivity of the crops and livestock also. The second important challenge when you look at the global level is that the growing number of chronically undernourished population. So this is a very significant factor because we should take care of the undernourished population. For that, what is required? We need to increase the agriculture production, and not only that thing, whatever the food grains we are providing to the population, that should be nutritionally rich. So along with the food security, we should focus on the nutrition security as well. The third important challenge is that slowly and steadily, because of the increase in standard of living and other the consumeristic attitudes, slowly we are shifting towards the consumption of meat and dairy products. However, it's very good for health aspect, but this will be having a drastic impact on the agriculture system, because when you wanted to produce more of meat products or dairy products, definitely the stress will be there on the agricultural crops and on agricultural land also. So in order to meet these demand, or in other words, to address the dietary shift pattern, so we need to increase agriculture production, and whatever the small area we have, for instance, in our country we have the net zone area is 141 million hectares. At no cost we can increase it. We cannot increase it because the population pressure is there. So a lot of the challenges from the urbanization, industrialization, other activities. So it's very difficult to increase the agricultural land area. So what is required is that we have to increase the productivity. So we need to increase the productivity. That is a very important goal, because then only we can address the issue of the dietary shift and the nutritional demand by the growing population. So then only we can address it. So this is a third important challenge. Fourth important challenge is, if you look at it, the demand for the energy resources, that is increasing. So our dependence on fossil fuels, for a long time we were dependent on the fossil fuels, but we need to switch over. We should think about a transition to the renewable energy sources. Why? Because then only our environment can be saved in fact, and because a lot of pollution that is released because of the fossil fuel consumption. So what is required is that we need to look for certain greener pastures, or in other words, greener fuels. And particularly when in the ambit of greener fuels, the most important thing is biofuels. It is coming up very in a prominent way, significant way. The use of biofuels is coming up, and in order to increase the production of biofuels, what is required? We have to grow the biofuel crops. That's essentially important, because when we are talking about the first generation biofuels, definitely we need to increase the non-food crops. So in that way, what happened? There will be stress on the agricultural land, because in agricultural land the main purpose is that we have to increase the feed and fodder. That's the basic thing. But if you have a demand from the biofuel production, particularly the first generation biofuels, definitely there will be clash of interest between the food crops and non-food crops. So that is the reason why we are switching over to the second generation biofuels and third and fourth generation, wherein the stress on the food crops is drastically reduced, and we'll be looking for the biofuels from the algae, and even synthetic biology has been used for increasing the biofuel production. That is another story. But here, when you look at it at the first instance, this biofuel, when you talk about biofuel crops, so definitely there is a clash between the food crops and biofuel crops, that we need to look at it, and we have to arrive at a consensus. That is another challenge as far as biofuel crops are concerned, or biofuel consumption is concerned. But definitely it is a very important goal, in fact, because we need to think about energy transition as well. So next challenge is that when you talk about the agriculture practices across the globe, if you see it, we have switched over from the traditional practices to the intensive agriculture practices. It's very modern in approach. However, it has a certain pitfalls. When I say pitfalls, this modern agriculture is intensive in nature. It is industrial agriculture. And what is required is that a lot of inputs, subsidies are required, even the fertilizers has to be added to the soil, and the pesticides. So many inputs, particularly the chemicals, have been added into the system, industrial agriculture system or intensive agriculture system. This is very impactful. When I say impactful, it is causing a lot of harm to the environment. Particularly, the impact on the agrobiodiversity has been very visible. So there is loss of biodiversity, agriculture biodiversity, and another significant factor as far as the modern intensive agriculture is concerned, our focus is only on few crops. Particularly for global agriculture landscape, if you look at it, we are focusing only on the almost 20 crops. Look at it, we are narrowing down the genetic base. Our dependency on the food crops has been very narrowed down, only 20 crops. So it is, since the narrowing of the genetic base can be very hazard. Why? Because we are focusing only on the few crops. So if something happens to those crops, if any pest epidemic or something like that, disease causing organism, if it is affecting drastically, what will happen? Definitely that can lead to famine-like condition, and it will be very dreadful. So many examples are there in the past. For instance, no one can forget about the 1943 Bengal famine. This particular Bengal famine is caused by the paddy organism, the what you call pathogen, Helminthosporium oryzae. This has caused devastation for the agriculture crops, particularly the paddy crop, and that has led to a Bengal famine. So what I want to say is that these pest and disease pandemic or epidemic, it is increasing because of the intensive agriculture practices. What we need to do is that we need to look for certain sustainable agriculture practices which will be safeguarding the environment. It will be safeguarding all the resources that is available with us, the soil environment, even the microclimatic condition can be monitored or manipulated or regulated. So in a way, so we need to switch over certain to a farming practice that is more close to the environment, more close to the nature, and that definitely it will be in sustainable nature. So this is all the challenges that we are facing, I mean agriculture sector is facing with respect to agriculture biodiversity. So what we need to do is that we need to take all the steps possible, map the resources, agriculture biodiversity resources. Thereafter, we have to document it, we need to conserve it. We'll take all the possible steps to conserve the agriculture biodiversity. So now, going further, we need to understand the basic, the components of agriculture biodiversity. When you talk about agriculture biodiversity, it is having different components. Basically, it is talking about what? The variety and variability that is existing among the plants, the microorganisms, even all organisms that is related with agriculture. Okay, at both at the genetic level, species level, and ecosystem level. This is basically agriculture biodiversity. So when you deeply go into the concept of agriculture biodiversity, it includes the crop varieties, livestock breeds, fish species, and these are the main important crop component of agriculture biodiversity. The second is that non-harvested produce. Non-harvested produce means, for instance, in the production system, agriculture production system, which has not been harvested, that is also part of agriculture biodiversity. For example, the soil microorganisms, the pollinators, even the biocontrol agents. Biocontrol agents means biological organisms. These are very important component. Let me explain later. So the third important component is the non-harvested produce in the wider environment. Wider environment means the organisms or the plants that we are using for certain purpose like windbreaks, shelter belts. This is also part of agriculture biodiversity. So now, when you go deeper, we can understand about the crop varieties, the livestock breeds, strains, how important it is. The second component of agriculture biodiversity that is to be discussed further. So that is soil microorganisms. These soil microorganisms are playing a pivotal role in the agriculture production system because they have a very important role. For instance, biogeochemical cycling of nutrients. It provides certain favorable environment for the growth of the plants. The root environment. It's very favorable because of the soil microorganisms. These microorganisms has to be conserved, and their health of the soil is dependent on this soil biodiversity. So that has to be taken care of it. Next one is that biocontrol agents, I was talking about it. We know fully well that how biocontrol agents, there are a lot of organisms that are very much part of the biological pest management. So when these biocontrol agents are natural organisms, they're natural prey and predators. They are in the system. So they have a very important role to control the growth of the pathogens, the population of the pathogens. So their existence is very essential for the sustenance of agroecosystem. And third one is, I was just talking about the windbreaks and shelter belts. They have a very important role to play in agriculture production system. For instance, if you are thinking about a crop like banana plantation, so there any kind of extreme events, the wind movement, if it's a very severe in nature, it can cause havoc to the banana plantations. So for that, to address that issue, we can think about a windbreak or a shelter belts. So this will be helping us to manage the banana plantation, and also these windbreaks have certain other services to render to the farmers. The windbreaks can help us to enrich the soil by improving the soil organic carbon content, and also it can be, these windbreaks are providing a lot of biomass. Those biomass can be used as fodder for the animals. The farmers, the livelihood is dependent on these kind of biomass, particularly the feed and fodder. So in a way, these windbreaks are playing a very important role to the livelihood of the farmers. Definitely, it is a very significant factor. This is about the agriculture biodiversity. And this agriculture biodiversity, I was talking about the components of the agriculture biodiversity. Basically, when you look deeply, it is a product of interaction between the genetic resources, the environment component, and the management system, and what is that? The activities of human beings. So the four factors combinedly act upon the organisms. That is the essence of agriculture biodiversity. When you talk about the genetic resources, what it includes the crop component, the animal component, the fish component. These are the basic things that we know it. And when you talk about the other component of agriculture biodiversity, that is basically the environment component. Environment means the soil environment, the chemical environment, even the climatic condition that is within the crop canopy, that's called microclimatic condition. So these all will be interacting with the organisms, particularly the crop organisms or livestock. So that will be leading to what kind of a favorable environment is provided to the growth of the organisms. That is the second dimension of it. The third dimension is that the socio-economic and cultural dimension. So this is a very significant factor. Why? Because every action of human beings, the agriculture practices, that can have a drastic effect on the agriculture biodiversity, any activity, any farming activity. So what is required is that whatever the activity, farming, the practices that we are adopting by the human beings, what we need to do, we should take care of the environment, and at back of our mind we should have a thought that definitely our actions will be having a enhancing effect on the agriculture biodiversity. This is a very significant component. So these are the three dimensions of agriculture biodiversity. Going further on the topic, this agriculture biodiversity, we'll be seeing that how important the agriculture biodiversity is. The first and foremost role the agriculture biodiversity is playing is that the production of food grains, the feed, fodder, even the fiber crops and biofuel crops. Just now I was talking about it. So the first important role is that the production of these important essential components to feed the population, particularly the human population or animal population. So that is the first important role played by the agriculture biodiversity. The second important role played by the agriculture biodiversity is that it is, what we call wealth of resource. Agriculture biodiversity is a wealth of resource. Why? Because it is a repository of all the valuable information, genetic resources. These genetic resources can be tapped to increase the agriculture production or productivity gain is possible by using the genetic resources. That's the first important role played by the agriculture biodiversity. The second important role is that during extreme conditions, even the weather conditions, to address that issue, the plant must adapt, and that adaptation will be possible if you go for using these resources, whether it's a land race or certain VD plants, the genetic information or those land races can be wild relatives. A very important thing. Wild crop relatives are there. So those species can be used in the plant breeding effort to produce a crop variety that will withstand the extreme climatic conditions, extreme weather events, extreme soil conditions. So that is the second important thing of role played by the agriculture biodiversity. Third important thing is that I was just talking about the diversification. The diversification is the need of the hour for the farmers, whether it is a temporal diversification or a spatial diversification. So when you talk about diversification, that will be made possible by using effectively the agriculture biodiversity. In fact, that is an insurance against any kind of extreme events. So the farmers' livelihood is dependent on agriculture biodiversity. Even their security is dependent on agriculture biodiversity. Once they are diversifying their farm activity, diversifying the agriculture enterprises, not only the crop enterprise, livestock enterprise, fish enterprise, prawn culture. So when they are diversifying it, there is definitely it's an insurance. At any kind of events, if it is extreme events that is taking place, the weather or something like that, even one enterprise, if it is faulting or some losses occur in that one enterprise, in other enterprises, definitely the farmers will be getting a lot of benefits. At least income generating capacity will be enhanced. So this is a very important component role played by the agricultural biodiversity. And very interesting point is that globally, if you look at it, almost around 40% of the croplands in the agricultural landscape, they are cross-pollinated crops. When I say they are cross-pollinated crops, definitely the role of the pollinators, whether it is a honeybee or a bat or a bird, their role is very important. So this has been done by the agriculture biodiversity. So these crops, particularly almost 40% of the crops, are dependent on the cross-pollinated pollinators. So definitely we should take the steps possible to conserve the organisms, the pollinators particularly, because their role is immense as far as the production is concerned. Interestingly, these crop plants, when I say it is a cross-pollinated crops, they are basically horticulture plants. When I say they are horticulture plants, means their purpose, when you look at it, horticulture, there are a lot of benefits there. The first and foremost important benefit is that they are nutritionally rich. So in order to address the issue of nutritional security, so this horticulture plants, horticulture produce is very, very important thing. So there again, the role of agrobiodiversity has been very significant. So these are all the aspects that we need to take into account as far as the the importance of agriculture biodiversity is concerned. So further, when you look at it, a lot of services have been provided by the agriculture biodiversity, whether it's regulating services or provisioning services are being provided to the not only to the farmers and also to the environment. For instance, take for instance the soil environment. The soil environment, whether it's the soil moisture content or soil aeration or soil organic carbon, even the soil microorganisms, everything has been regulated by the agriculture biodiversity. So this is a very significant factor because it's having a lot of resources. The agriculture biodiversity is having a lot of services to render to the human beings, to the other organisms also. So what is required is that we need to take all the steps possible to conserve these group of organisms, definitely, because they are very, very significant. But however, if you look closely, the dynamics of it, when the present day, if you look at it, this agriculture biodiversity is having a lot of threats, facing a lot of threats. The most important threat is the land use changes. That is a significant thing because we know on one hand agriculture production has to increase, but on the other hand, if we look at the human population is also increasing. In fact, the world's largest one, number one is India. Almost it is 140 crores, more than that. So huge population is there, but the availability of land, agricultural land, is decreasing. So in this context, if you look at it, that there's a lot of pressure on the agricultural land, and there's a pressure for land use changes. This land use change is the prime driver for loss of biodiversity. That is the number one thing. The second important thing is that the industrial aspect of agriculture, because when you industrialize the agricultural activity, that can lead to the use of more of chemicals, the fertilizers, that also has a drastic effect on the agriculture biodiversity. That is the second important thing. The third important threat to biodiversity is that homogenization of agriculture landscape. When you talk about homogenization of agriculture landscape, as I said that globally, if you look at it, we are dependent on only 20 croplands, and in some small at lower levels, at local levels, it is more of a belt, what you call crop belt, rice belt or paddy belt. It means that in a larger area we are focusing only on few crops. Okay. And particularly the paddy belt, wheat belt, means that in that locality, if you look at it in the region, so we only the particular crop, paddy crop, is grown. So in a way, what happened, we are homogenizing the agriculture landscape. That is a drastic, it can lead to a lot of problems actually, because when you homogenize the landscape, so there's a possibility of certain shocks. Whether it's the climate shock, even the marketing shock also, it is possible, because more of produce from one particular crop, that can lead to certain glut in the market. I'm talking about the what do you call that, regulated market, or there will be a lot of problems will be there. So this is again because we need to take into account, because this homogenization has to be taken care of. We need to think for the possible steps to diversify the agricultural landscape, and these are all the threats that we are facing it. So how to address this issue? We can think about the conservation practices, whether the in situ conservation or ex situ conservation. In situ means it's basically on-farm conservation, wherein the farmers will be playing a very important role to conserve the agriculture biodiversity. On the other hand, the ex situ conservation is basically the banks, seed banks, the fodder banks, the propagule banks, tissue culture banks. So it's a strategy to conserve the plant genetic resources. So now, to sum it up, we have discussed about the importance of agriculture biodiversity, and we have talked about the different components of agriculture biodiversity, and later the threats to biodiversity has been discussed. So now the issue is that, so how to conserve it? Definitely a lot of strategies are there. The ex situ conservation and in situ conservation strategies are there, but at the same time, the most important thing is that the farmers at their level, they have to take all the steps possible to conserve the valuable resources. Thank you very much.
Welcome to all.